Magnus started the grand final of the Airthings Masters Champion Chess Tour with a nice victory. You can see his beautiful edge pawn, which is creating all the problems. Hikaru is just disappointed. The moment the rook leaves the back rank without a check, the rook will go in. As in knight g5, rook moves, and it's mate. The king could have gone up as well, but he comes in. And yeah, it's over because the king can get in. And knight g5 was. Hikaru just leaves. So nice victory for Carlsen in the first game of the 4 game match. The game started with an English by Magnus Carlsen. Hikaru responded knight f6, knight f3, e6, knight c3, and now d5, and then d4. And it suddenly transposed to the queen's gambit declined. It's almost as if white started with d4, c4, and black declined the gambit with e6. Takes, queen's gambit accepted, and after e4, black just plays b5 asking white to take, in which case black would be happy to take the center pawn, e4. But of course, Magnus plays e5, which is expected. But then black gets a nice outpost for the knight and it leaves weaknesses, light square weaknesses in the middle of the board. So it's considered as a concession to push the pawn to the center, leaving weaknesses. So knight d5 and now material is equal. He gets back the pawn. Hikaru goes knight b6, defending us a c4 pawn. a3, stopping bishop b4. Knight c6, bishop e3, queen d7, keeping an eye on the knight. Bishop is anyway going to come to b7. Knight c3, bishop b7, queen c2, and knight a5. As you can see, the c4 pawn gives control over b3. So knight b3 is a nice square to plant the knight on. Carlsen doesn't mind. He plays rook d1, rook b8, putting all the pressure on b3. Bishop e2, bishop e7, h4. So this is where Carlsen starts his journey with the h pawn, which Alpha Zero in its games used to play a lot of times. And the idea is to just keep pushing until h6. And if black pushes, then the g5 square becomes weak. And if black lets the white pawn reach h6, then that becomes a good position for the endgame as well. Because the black king who would have been castled here wouldn't be able to move out. And any pawn break here would help the pawn promote. So bishop c6, h5, bishop a4, and knight takes, queen takes, rook c1. Carlsen is welcoming the endgame, knight b3, and rook b1. Queen a5 check, king f1. Pawn c5. Hikaru goes for some counterplay, hitting at the center, and pawn h6. Carlsen just calmly ignoring anything happening here, just pushes the pawn till h6, g6, and now takes, and comes this nice little move, rook h4. The advantage of pushing the h pawn is a rook can come active like this. Now there's pressure on c4, and not just that, bishop takes c4 is a threat. If you play rook c8, still bishop takes c4 would come. Knight takes and queen takes. So you would be a pawn up. Magnus Carlsen is going to be a pawn up because there's no defense. Knight a5 allows a very nice little trick here. b4, a fork. If you take 1%, the queen hangs. So knight a5 is also not possible in this position. So Hikaru just castles, bishop takes, rook c8. Now how would he continue? What should white do? Just exchange. Queen check and then takes. So material has got exchanged, but it's a pawn up for white, and this pawn is a monster on h6. Rook b4. Queen has two options, d5 and a2. Queen d5, he did not want to go because knight g5, knight e4, knight f6, and things can become ugly. And that's also the square for the knight. So queen a2, temporary hiding for the queen. Rook d1 and a5. So knight d5 is possible, but he didn't like the endgame after takes, and rook c1. Everything looks bad. f7 is a target, and the king can't move. So pawn a5, rook b5, a4, and now queen e4. So preparing to play knight g5, queen f4, and get in. Also, if black doesn't do anything, then queen f4, queen f6, and it's incoming. So black has to go for the exchange of queens. Takes, 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 and now rook d4. Nice move. Of course, rook takes b2 not possible, not because knight hangs, but because of mate. So knight takes b2 is possible, but then the king would just come in, and when the knight moves, a4 pawn would hang. The rook is tied down to the last rank because any rook move allows mate. So Hikaru goes rook c8, defending his knight, and now rook d7. Knight takes b2 and knight g5. Rook f8, rook comes back. It's a nice move. Rook c8 was played and rook f4. So this was the idea. Instead of attacking from d7, he reroutes the rook to f4. The point being, if rook goes back, then just king e2, and king would just come and pick up this knight. It's trapped. If you move the rook away, f7 falls. So here Hikaru goes for broke and goes rook check. Just desperate checks. He's also in time trouble at this moment. It's completely lost. King e2, rook check, king e3, rook check, and when king comes close, then rook goes back. Now rook b4, attacking the knight and threatening mate. But because king is on d2, Hikaru has knight c4 check. But then king calmly moves away, and now rook goes back, defending the mate. And then Magnus just picks up the pawn. Knight takes e5. So even with just so little material, it just completely lost because of this monster pawn. Rook a7, again forcing rook f8 almost, but Hikaru doesn't go for rook f8 because white would just keep pushing and win easily. So he goes for knight g4, keeping an eye on h6, allowing knight f7. It doesn't allow rook f7. That's a good thing with knight g4. Knight f7 allowed, and now rook b8, and then f3, kicking the knight back. But then rook check, king moves, knight check, king moves, rook check. King can go to e5, that would have been nice. But the Magnus just comes to e3. And after rook moves, he just brings a knight back, threatening mate. And you have no stopping it. If you move the king, h7 falls. And here Hikaru played knight d1 and just lost on time. So this was the start to the grand finale of the Airthings Masters Championship Tour.